Thanks again so much to my donors and my super fans, Andre Stars up above. I'm so grateful to you for this mix. Has been weird all day, all day, all day. It's just been weird all day. I'm so grateful to you for stopping by and chilling with me for a bit. We're going to get into some wisdom teachings in a moment to grow our dreams up and to create our own magic for ourselves. I've come to the earth to, where's my graphic? Oh, I meant to put better batteries in this mouse. Y'all give me 1 second. Could someone from production bring me better batteries for this mouse, please? Could someone in production bring me, I saw that this was losing its juice. We should also bring Instagram in on the mix for a little bit today. Okay. What am I missing? There we go. Thank you to my donors, my stars, for my patrons, for the batteries. I appreciate you. You're keeping the mouse going so that I can get into my PowerPoint presentation. I'm joking. There's no PowerPoint presentation. It's just love. Just simple love. What kind of dreams are you cooking today? What do you want to see come true for yourself? Do we have juice? Do we have power? Thank you, donors, for the batteries. Energizer Max, sponsored by our donors. Their names are scrolling on the screen. I appreciate you so much. We now have a mouse back, so now I can put up this graphic. I'm only here for 3 reasons. My reasons are very, very clear. People kind of like squint at the screen all the time. Some of y'all are laying in bed right now, or you're in your cars, or sitting next to your lovers, or you're with your mom driving to the mall. Y'all are in all kinds of situations right now, and some of y'all are squinting at the screen in confusion. You're wondering who the fuck is this guy, number one? And then what does he do? I encourage, I equip, and I empower. And that's all it is. It's all it's been for 5 years since I started Love City Arts. That's all it's ever been. I'm here as a vessel of the universe. We're going to listen to a wisdom teaching in a second that's going to talk about how we all are the center point of the universe. We're all of us are the universe at one focal point. We're all the stars and everything, but we just the reason why you call me Andre in the Flow or Brother Dre or whatever is because I'm focused into this one body, into this one cell of 9.9 billion cells. It's magic. You are magic. Who, me? Yes, you are magic. You're magic. That's why I start calling these the magic sessions, because for people who tune in, these are going to be spots where they kind of tune into their magic. Now, the whole world is trying to pull you to be like everybody else. I'm not really concerned with being like everybody else. They're boring. They're very, very boring. The Muggles. Very, very, very boring people. You can almost see like the haze behind their eyes, especially the over 30 crowd. The over 30 crowd, they have like this haze that's like super dark. And I'm not going that direction anymore. I made some decisions in COVID. Now I've had my organization, my ministry, my brand. I've had all of this for 5 years, but I really got clear about the fact that I'm sent here to lift people up, to make sure that you don't forget on February 28th, this last day of February went like that. Don't forget your magic. Don't forget that there's greatness in you. And if you're not surrounded by people, because there's 9.9 billion people, I see the way the world's unfolding. I'm telling you this, everybody's not surrounded by people who are rooting for them in their success. I'm surrounded by love. You see my stars flashing on the screen. But everyone isn't. And even if you don't have stars of your own, let me be your star. Let me check my messages. I feel like I'm forgetting something. The real ones. The real ones. I'm gonna start naming names soon. Yeah, the real ones. We're good. We're good. Part of this process for me, friends, has been identifying who's really for me versus the casual passerby in life. This has been a revelation unto me. If I can just stay here for a couple seconds, we'll get to the wisdom teaching in a second. I got emails to clear. There's all sorts of things that I got to do. I'll probably work from now until it's now it's 1808 here. It's 1808 here, 608 local Eastern. So I'll probably work from 6 until 10 straight through, along with you. So you can go and come as you want. I don't really, I'm here. I'm in my studio. And so, I'll work for the next 4 hours. Just put in, just head down, work for my clients, lots of things to produce. Why am I talking about this? I think I almost had a tangent, but I also got to heat dinner up. I'm also going to have dinner in that 4-hour slot. Specific kinds of energies attract to other kinds of energies. I mean, this magnet thing, super powerful to me. That we are like magnets, that like unto like is drawn. So you can only be, that's why I don't get offended when people go and come from my streams, because you could only be attracted to me if you're attracted to the things I'm attracted to. Some people say opposites attract, but I don't really know about that. I know that's how the science works. Don't send me any crazy mail. Oh, that's another thing. I need to add the speak pipe. If anybody during our sessions, any of our magic sessions, if anybody wants to leave a voice memo to be played live on the air, you can go to what am I? You can go to campfireinthecloud.com in a few minutes. I'm going to put up a link where people can, you can use your phone and you can leave a message for us all here. And provided that it's something loving, and all negative messages will get forwarded to the FBI. Y'all know the rules. That's part of my terms and conditions. If you come onto my shit and you leave me a BS message, you will get your shit and your IP addresses. I don't care where your VPN is. You're going to get forwarded to the FBI. But I digress. I'm going to install a link on the website right now, so it's such that if people want to leave a message and want me to play it live on the air right now, where's the button? It's like where's the button? Did I move the button? There it is. Leave us a voice memo for the community vibe checks of the podcast. Yeah. So if you want your voice, here's what I say. Is this live? Are we plugged in? Are we patched in here or not? And believe it or not, folks, this is how I work. I'm an Aquarius. So this is me working actually right now. Isn't it wonderful? All right, so yeah, we're gonna do. I'm gonna launch Facebook ads, YouTube ads. I'm going to touch base with my clients for the top of the week check-in because it is Monday. All of that's gonna happen while I'm sitting here just chilling with y'all. We may put on some wisdom teachings. We may crank the lo-fi, but this is a magic session. It's a place for my magic to flow with the support of my stars up above. And also, it's a place for you to get into your magic. You know, there's magic in everybody. You just have to see it for yourself. There's magic in everybody. Excuse me. And there's magic for everybody. You just got to see it for yourself. Now, let me see if this is let me see what this. Stand by. Hey everybody, it's Andre and the Flow here. I hope that you're having a great day wherever you are on planet Earth. What a wonderful new baby day we have. Please leave a message about 90 seconds after the tone, and I would love to play your PG-13 comment about the singing, about the cafe, about Love City Arts, about whatever you want to share. Maybe you have an answer to the question of the day from the E-Blast. I would love to hear that after the tone. Have a great one, and remember, you're so loved. Take care. Yeah, so I'm going to add this link to campfireinthecloud.com, campfireinthecloud.com, campfireinthecloud.com. And if anybody wants to leave us a message for me to play on the air, just drop me a comment letting me know that you've left a voice memo for us, and I'll play it for everybody. We get about anywhere between 800 to 1,000 viewers on these streams, so if you want to dip your toe into the love flow and have your 15 seconds of fame, then you're more than welcome to share my stage in that way. Let me add the link in. And then what do I say over here? Leave us a voice memo. Yeah, leave us a voice memo for the podcast. I can write this. Leave us a voice memo, and we might. You know, I'm a screening kind of motherfucker. All right, and then I'll say here, yeah, this is how I work. I work in public. Yeah, if any of you want to come on, and I never take these streams down, so as long as you are PG-13 and you're saying something positive and putting some positivity into the air, I dream of a day when tons of people are leaving their messages and we're just playing messages back to back to back. That'd be fun. For you camera shy people. Now, yeah. There we go. Leave us a voice memo and we might play it on air. That's great. I love this magic. I love it here. Yeah. Save. Great. Yeah. So if any of you go to campfireinthecloud.com and if you leave let me see if there's any messages. I've not checked in a long time. Log in. Inbox. Nope. No one's left a message yet. Yeah. Great. That's great. Oh. Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Great, yeah. So, this isn't a one-way conversation. You can either chat on the screen or you can leave a voice memo over on campfireinthecloud.com, campfireinthecloud.com, campfireinthecloud.com. All right. Hope you have a wonderful day. I'm Andre in the Flow. Hi, everybody. I'm Andre in the Flow. Thanks so much for stopping by. I am live streaming my pivot into full-time entrepreneurialism. I no longer want to have a boss, and so I won't. You'll be my boss. I think I'm a solid investment. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. Is that a rap song? Is that a rap song? Oh, man. It's absolutely wonderful. Oh, this is so good. I love it so much. Hit him with the thoughts. Listen, 95% of people die with their dreams not realized. Don't be a statistic. You hear me? 95% of people die without their magic manifested. They're scared. They're scared of being great. And that's why they suffer. I'm not one of those people. I'm not going to suffer. We're going to make the magic of these dreams come true. One bite at a time. How do you eat your elephant? One bite at a time? Oh, why are you off the screen? My bad. I couldn't read your whole comment. I'm sorry, superfluous burners. I had to bring that into the shot. Oh yeah, we listened last night. You should have been here last night at 2 a.m. when I was streaming. I played a thing, and I'll play it again. I'll pull it up right now. Actually, we can listen to it together. About how the devil is all a made-up thing. Yeah, I know that. We're on the same vibe. We're the same tribe. Yeah, I don't believe in any of that hocus pocus either. I believe in getting my ass into these emails and closing these contracts and closing these deals and finding my 1,000 true fans. I don't believe in the devil, but I believe in myself. Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. All scare tactics. And we know who they were trying to scare. The slaves. They were using white Jesus and the devil to scare the slaves into submission. Mm-mm. You can miss me with all that. I'm just here for the love. Thank you kindly. Could I get a table for two? It's just me and love. Yep. Yep. Table for two. Yes. Me and love. It's just us. I'm doing all that hocus pocus and bullshit. This is the best meal of the day. It's also because it's 6 p.m. and it's 6:31. This is my first meal of the day. This is wonderful. So good. Thank you so. Thank you. I'm trying to save money, so I made it myself. It's wonderful. This is so good. Oh my God. What's under there? Is that the quinoa? Is that more quinoa? Okay, yeah. Let me get some hot sauce for that quinoa. Ooh, yes, Lord. All right. We'll get some, what's playing? Where's it playing from? Oh, we got multiple, okay, that's fine. Great. All right, here we go, y'all. Let us find. Oh yeah, that channel was so loud. Ooh. Thank you to all of my true fans, my stars. Here we go. All right, enjoy everybody.
Around the town, and we're told all around the nation, a strange phenomenon is evidenced. Long lines of people waiting to see a motion picture. In rain and in cold and in storm and in heat. We might wonder, is this some great Shakespearean drama? Some classical musical production? Actually, it is a cinematic experience grotesquely dramatizing a sordid and frightening incident of supposed possession, which, if I can be so frank to say, figuratively and literally regurgitates on the screen and on the audience. And the picture is The Exorcist. Now, because this kind of a production or picture or story suggests as reality a phenomenon that is at best highly speculative, it is quite disruptive to any rational process of dealing with the ongoingness of life. But even more, I think it should be said that it is dangerously unhealthy for any person whose not in a good state of mental health. Now, the question might be asked, why is a picture like this made? Well, it's obvious, because people will pay to see it. That's what people in the entertainment business are about. Why do people go to see it? Curiosity, whetted by, we must admit, a lot of good public relations. Conformity with the in thing. This is what is being done today. But I think we must also admit that it is partly as a result of certain failures on the part of established religion. The failure of teaching and presenting a God that is large enough. Plus the sense that if God and the devil are realities in the world, the trend of things in the world in recent years would indicate that the devil has the upper hand, so that perhaps there's a little speculation in terms of whether it's advisable to change loyalties. As the mother in The Exorcist observes, she's not sure that God exists, but she's certain that Satan does. The conflicts and the confusion of the Vietnam years, the moral weakness of governments and business and political leaders, has probably, more than we know, shaken the faith in enlightened optimism, and suggesting that life and existence are insane. And as we say, with a very subtle, perhaps even subconscious shift of allegiance to Satan or to the darkness. Now, this may be somewhat surprising, and we don't want to exaggerate the scope of it, but at least among what is called the counterculture of our society, which may be as large or small as our personal mind wants to accept it, there is a fad of Satanism, the cult of Satan worship, which has even given rise to Satan churches all across the land, with black magic and witches and ritualistic orgies, containing a hodgepodge of Oriental and Western superstitions filled with a lot of obvious bunkum and hokum. But it could well be that at times of uncertainty and confusion in the world, the unhappy persons, the credulous, the vaguely neurotic, and those who are always looking for some form of inside knowledge can find in Satanism an easily rationalized approach to life for completely uninhibited behavior and for the release of all sorts of pent-up frustrations. I suspect the whole thing is partly a put-on, partly neurotic, partly an escape, and partly dead serious. And it is when it becomes dead serious that it becomes quite dangerous, as I suppose we could say the Charles Manson affair and other ritualistic murders that have taken place in modern years should make clear. But even short of this, it is certainly psychologically risky to get involved in any sort of perverse use of the human psyche. Now, before we consider the matter of the reality of the devil or of Satan or of evil and so forth, let's just take a brief look at the idea of Satan possession as depicted in The Exorcist. And I think here again we must see this against the backdrop of a lot of other things that have gone on. As some of you may know, this particular novel was based upon an actual event which happened in St. Louis. And several Catholic writers re-examining the St. Louis case on which William Blatty's novel was based have conclusively denied the possibility of any kind of psychological intervention in that particular incident. Now, it's kind of interesting that unknown to most folks, through long periods of time, the Catholic Church has actually appointed official exorcists in certain parts of the world. And I was reading recently where a priest, Joseph de Tonquédec, who was the official church exorcist in Paris for over 50 years, which means that during that time, certainly he was involved in a lot of cases similar to this, a lot of this kind of phenomenon, therefore should have some sort of a valid opinion about it. Startlingly enough, he said that he was convinced that after 50 years of practice as the official exorcist of the church, that he had never come across a genuine case of possession. He says, and we quote, "Exorcism is an impressive ceremony capable of acting effectively on a sick man's subconscious experience, and the abjurations or ritualistic denials addressed to the demon and the various ritual observances can easily call up what he calls a diabolical mythomania in word or deed in a psyche already weak. Call the devil and you'll see him, or rather not him, but a portrait made up of a sick man's idea of him." And incidentally, this word mythomania simply means lying or exaggeration. It means a creature of the subconscious confusion of the individual himself. Now, even if we will grant validity to a case of Satan possession, I think we must recognize that these cases are extremely isolated. And to build them up and exaggerate their importance is to take a simplistic and very paranoid view of life. I suspect that the time will come when we will need to make some changes in our whole basic area of research, physically and emotionally and psychically and in the area of paranormal, when we become more concerned not with what makes people sick, but what makes people well. Certainly there's already some talk about this new direction in the field of medical research, and I suspect that it should be given some attention in the field of paranormal research. But from primitive times, man has tried to understand life, and especially the mystery that he has called evil. It has been very difficult for man, especially in earlier times when he didn't have too many things to judge by, to see life as a whole experience. He has forever seen partially. And the very word Hades comes from a root word which literally means not to see. Blindness to reality, the inability to see the whole picture. Primitive man was very certain that the lightning was chasing him, and that the river that drowned his brother did it on purpose. And so, in his simplistic view of life, any dilemma was attributed to some sort of an evil force. Actually, this dualistic concept of life carried over into Judeo-Christian religion. And anyone who does not understand the evolutionary strains involved in the development of any religion is really missing the whole idea, and he's not able to understand the religion. In other words, the question was asked in the beginning, and it was still asked, and to many is asked today. How could God allow this to happen? And quite often, having no answer because of an inadequate concept of God, the conclusion is, well, it must then be the work of the devil, which is a personalization of evil. And this simplistic view still prevails with many. So evil and evil spirits, devils and devil possession are the outgrowth of man's inadequate consciousness of God. I'll say that again. Evil and evil spirits and devil possession are the outgrowth of man's inadequate consciousness of God. William James, certainly one of America's most distinguished philosophers, says there can be no existence of evil as a force to the healthy-minded individual. We must avoid thinking of evil as a thing in itself, a force that works against man or against God, if you will. And a good illustration of this that many of us have not lost sight of, though it may have been a long while since we were students, that in studying mathematics or simply using a mathematical principle, if we get the wrong answer in addition or multiplication or in some sort of algebraic equation, we do not suddenly feel that there is an anti-mathematical principle that is luring us into wrong answers. Anyone who believes that certainly is not quite ready yet to understand the whole process of learning. That when we get wrong answers, despite the function of the principle, it's because we do not understand the principle and are not applying it properly. Therefore, it is strictly a problem of ignorance. Now, we may say, and many come up with this answer, but after all, there are so many wrong answers in life today. Man must therefore be an evil creature, or he must be under the influence of an evil force. But man simply needs to know himself to understand the truth. The important thing is not how much weakness man evidences, because there is a lot of weakness being evidenced and always has been. The important thing is how much strength man is capable of. And we cannot understand the dynamic process of a universe of light if we go around looking at darkness. We cannot understand the divinity of man if we're ever ferreting through all the weaknesses of man and the criminality of man. The important thing, if we want to know anything about the divinity of man and the divine potential in man, is to take a good hard look at the flowering excellence of the few, at a Jesus or a Buddha or a Kagawa or a Schweitzer, or at the better expressions or the finer revelations that come out of the consciousness of all persons at certain times. Certainly there's a lot of evil in the world, and any person in metaphysics or in truth or unity or religious science or what that goes around as a Pollyanna saying there's no evil, there's no bad, there's nothing wrong, everything's good, is not really facing the facts of appearances. There's a lot of evil in the world. There's a lot of evil or sinful people involved in a lot of injustices and crime and corruption and various other human mistakes. That is the level of the appearance, but the important thing is, what is at the root? The root is the evil is simply a concealment of the good. And what we call sin is simply the frustration of the divine potentiality within the person. Now let's take a look at one of the classic stories of Satan possession in the Bible, which is Job. Take a look at Job. Now Job is not a historical figure, but this is a drama, a very interesting one. Some have said it's probably one of the greatest literary works of all times, the play, Job. But here we have a kind of Satan possession, Job's classic struggle with Satan. But if you look carefully at this drama, this story, it has some rather interesting things to say. It indicates that Job's trials were the result of his own inability to see clearly. There again, not to see is the meaning of Hades. And so he was in a hellfire and in a turmoil and had all sorts of perverse experiences in his life because of his inability to see, his inability to let go of the effort to justify himself, to rise above his own ego-centered attitude. And the interesting thing in the story, or in the play, when Job let go of Job, the devil disappeared as a spent force. And the force was simply the built-up confusion of the ego within Job. Job was being deviled, as we so often are in our experience, by his own adversary, And the adversary in Job was his own adverse reactions to life. It was a very painful experience. Let's don't in any way overlook this. The man had all sorts of tragic experiences in his life. But as these things always are, the pain is an evidence of something that's happening within the individual. Khalil Gibran puts his finger on this. He says, pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Turn to the Aquarian Gospel, and we find a very interesting statement, quite relevant to this whole matter of the devil and of devil possession. He says, the only devil from which man must be redeemed is self, the lower self. If man would find his devil, he must look within. His name is self. If man would find his Savior, he must look within. And when the demon self has been dethroned, the Savior, love, will be exalted to the throne of power. The devil and the burning fires are both the works of man, and none can put the fires out and dissipate the evil one but man who made them both. In other words, it's our negative reaction to persons or situations that becomes our devil. And in time, the devil rides us and tortures us with hell fires. And as Aldous Huxley said, experience is not what happens to a person, it is what a person does with what happens to him. Whenever we commit ourselves to growth of any kind, there is a force of inertia that sets in, the tug of the human to continue in former ways. When we are deviled by any kind of limiting forces which are the result of the confusion of our own mind, we can say, get thee hence. Him only will I serve. I will realize that I am a creature of the activity of God, and I know that God is the only power in my life, and I refuse to acknowledge the forces of my mind as having any precedence over this one power. In the gospel story, the word devil and demon have been misunderstood. The Aramaic root words, shida and shidana, are used colloquially more than not. And the term applied to people who have queer ideas and do queer things, who talk too much, who are carrying their heavy loads of bitterness or hatred or fear. In other words, as we so often say in modern parlance, the man has a monkey on his back. He has a devil. And the devil is the result of his own confusion, the own inability to sort out and to relate positively to the dynamic forces of God within him. So when the phrase cast out demons is used in the scriptures, it refers certainly to healing the mentally unbalanced or the insane, and there's so much that we don't know about that. But it also refers to people who were carrying a torch of hatred or fear. In other words, when it says the person had a devil, it means the person was possessed of his own fury that was breaking loose upon him. Now, don't minimize this. This fury that builds up within the person can create a tremendous, violent force, which is what the picture The Exorcist tried to depict. But it depicts it in a way that suggests all sorts of other nonentities, which is really a distortion of what really happens. It can become a tremendous disturbance, a tremendous fury built up within the person, so that he acts in ways that are terribly abnormal and perverse. And it can not only be something very real to him, but it can be very real to the persons who have to work with him. So again, we don't want to minimize it. It's a problem, as dealing with any kind of mental confusion is a problem. But we want to realize that the whole gruesome, frightening experience is the build-up confusion that is within and totally the creature of the imagination of the person himself. Jesus actually gives some very simple keys to self-exorcism. First of all, when he says a man's enemies are they of his own household, he puts very clearly the point that the problem is always what goes on within ourselves, not what goes on around us. He said, agree with your adversary. The adversary, as we've said, is the adverse reaction in your own mind. When problems hang on, it's because consciously or subconsciously There is a holding to them in bitterness or fear or hatred or anxiety. Thus we find ourselves possessed of a devil, which is a devil of our own making. To agree with your adversary then means to understand what is involved, to get your mind in neutral so that you do not resist these things as being entities of themselves, but allow yourself to get into the flow of divine inspiration. Jesus doesn't mean to give in to negatives, but to deny them the only power they have, the power of your own limited thought. Again, as the Aquarian Gospel puts it, the devil is the work of man, and no one can dissipate the evil one but the one who made it, you. Another concept of self-exorcism in Jesus' teaching is, if a person smites thee on one cheek, turn to him the other also. This is not to encourage a milquetoast attitude toward life. It's a challenge to turn from one state of consciousness, the one in which you are involved in this turmoil of mental disturbance, where you felt hurt and resistance, to turn from this to another state of consciousness where you know your oneness with the inner forces, with God. The truth is, you can never be hurt unless you are hurtable. Hurtability is not in some other force, it's in yourself. You can never be upset unless you're upsettable. Upsettability is in your consciousness, not in someone else. And whenever you are hurt or upset, it is a very good thing to know, as we would say in some instances, your slip is showing. Or perhaps in a larger sense, it's good to know that your pool of negativity, which is your devil, has surfaced. You're showing your own devil, but it's the confusion of your own consciousness causing this human reaction. But we always have a choice. The choice to turn to the more positive state in the deeper levels of consciousness. We have that choice unless we become so immersed in this pool of negativity that we lose our rational ability to take hold of things. And this often happens in any kind of mental disturbance, and we don't want to minimize this. But what we're saying, this is not because man has been possessed by outer forces, but because he did not adequately handle the confusions in himself and build up this maelstrom, this vortex of confusion in his own consciousness. So, in a sense, we need to be very alive and alert, if you will, to practical exorcism all along the way. Whenever a person causes you or seems to cause you some sort of pain or upset or disturbance, that the person has really done you a favor because he has helped you to understand a weak link in your own consciousness. And if you refuse to admit that the pain was not caused by the person but by your own negative reaction to the person, then, like Job, you create a situation that devils you, and you give the torch to the hellfires that burn and burn and burn, and as we say, there is the devil to pay. So, the devil in all his forms, Pluto, Lucifer, Satan, Diablo, Mephisto, all the myriad forms of devil spirits which have been the delight of fiction writers throughout all times, have come out of the imagination of man. They're the creation of man's consciousness. And the satanic possession is a complicated form of self-possession and the perversion of the basically positive forces of the mind. As the Aquarian Gospel puts it, man makes his devil and then becomes afraid of him and flees. His devil is emboldened and follows him away and casts him into torturing fires, but they're all created by the person himself. So, how many things are deviling you today? The need is to put the fires out and dissipate the evil one because we've made them both. The truth that we proclaim regularly every day on our radio broadcast is that you can change your life by altering your thoughts. You can't always control things in the world, but you can control how you deal with them. But you can only control thought if you realize that you have the power to control thought. It's inherent within man, who's created in the image likeness of God. Unless we understand that, we may give in to every subtle, vagrant thought that flits across the screen of life. and build up all sorts of negative forces in our consciousness. But, and I say this emphatically, there is no evil force lying in wait for man ever. That's my statement. There is no evil force lying in wait for man ever. You are a creature of light in a universe of light. If, as Paul says, you see in a mirror darkly and see in part, then you will see dark things, which are the result of your partial perception of the whole. And they will always be the shadowy forms of the things that are deviling you in your own mind. So we need to get the basic wholeness of life, the feeling of oneness, the idea of the basic divinity of man. Know it as a principle, no matter how it may be frustrated or concealed. And I say, never permit the simplistic or paranoid view that shadows of mental doubt are caused by evil forces. And I say, reject out of hand the implication of possession by any satanic force. The only thing that can occupy your mind is what you permit to be there, even the distortions of your mind. You are the master, even if you've been a poor master. And if in the limited exercising of your mastery you have allowed all sorts of things to happen within you, then you need, and you certainly can, stand up as did Jesus and say, get thee hence, and thus exercise your own mind. As the poet says, we can go out into the darkness and put our hand into the hand of God, for it shall be to us better than light and safer than a known way.
study of metaphysics gives us a new sense of perspective by which to deal with the world. In a very real sense, it introduces us to a new dimension of reality. Fact is that when we get into the study of metaphysics, humanly there's a tendency to get on our charger like Don Quixote and go out and try to change the world. But one of the fundamentals that so often is overlooked is that metaphysics does not deal with changing the world. The whole principle is based upon ourselves. It is not the world that we're concerned about, but our thought about the world. The important key to effective living, then, is not trying to find the way to set things right and to straighten people out and to get the world to stop acting like it does. Not to set things right, but to see them rightly. Right seeing is the fundamental essence of truth. Metaphysics is a technique in right seeing, helping you to see things from a particular perspective, as Emerson would say, from the highest possible point of view. And all this is wrapped up in what we're calling today the art of thinking. It seems to me that the greatest neglect in education today, and it's not my intent to nitpick about the educators, because certainly people here in this profession are doing a tremendous work, helping people in a tremendous way. But I think there has been a neglect that has set into modern education. It's very subtle. Unless we think we're pointing at one particular movement, we'll say that the same problem is found in the study of metaphysics, another kind of education. It's a failure in the instruction in the art of thinking. In other words, the whole thought process is so often simply taken for granted. We're thinking creatures, and so we think. And we're told what to think. And we're exposed to all sorts of levels of learning, and we're supposed to think about them and to memorize them and to report them back much as we've heard them. It is rare in education that we're introduced to the process of how to think. The mind is dealt with for the most part as a fact collector and a word dispenser. And this is so true in the study of metaphysics. That we're told that we're thinking creatures, we're mental beings, and therefore the important thing is you must think this, you must think that, you must think the other. So we're constantly building in and programming our mind with affirmations and techniques and treatments and so forth, and learning to verbally repeat them and picture them in the words that we express. Thought for the average person is a reflex process. In other words, things happen and we react in thought. We become worried, we become fearful, we become concerned and anxious, or on the other hand, we become happy and inspired. And we assume, and this assumption is almost universally prevalent among people, we assume that the thoughts that we think are produced by the circumstances that we experience. And that mind is something that we hold within our skull by which we can deal with the world out there. Things happen and we react, we think, and we say, well, of course I'm upset. You'd be upset too if you had the same experiences. Life is a continuous reaction to outside stimuli to the average person. So one may be happy or sad, or life has meaning or is meaningless by evidence of what happens to us from day to day. We may even sometimes check the weather, or consult the stock market returns, or even go to a doctor to see how we feel. Ask the average person, how do you feel today? I don't know. I have to wait till I get down to the office to see what kind of a mood the boss is in. Then I'll know how I feel. But experiences do not cause thoughts. Emphasize, experiences do not cause thoughts. Someone may do something to you, and he may give you a perfect opportunity to be upset if you want to be upset. But if you don't want to be upset, you needn't be upset, you see. The incident happens. There's no use denying it. It's not saying that he didn't say it or it didn't happen or they're not doing these things in the world out there. They've happened, and it becomes history once it's happened. But as far as your experience is concerned, the incident is completely external. It's always on the outside. What happens in your mind happens as a result of your attitudes and your feelings and your habit patterns. Your mind is your domain. Now this is fundamental, and these words are easy to express, but it's so important to get this into our consciousness. You think what you want to think, or you think what you have habitually thought by a certain tendency of habit patterns. Your thoughts are your reactions to the incident, always. The incident did not make the thought. It is your mind, and you have been thinking and reacting in thought according to the level of your consciousness. I was talking to a young chap in a hotel one day. He was one of the hotel clerks. There was a lot of people coming in for a convention, and they were harassed, and people were there early, and other people were staying late, and you know, the usual thing that happens in hotels. And one of them was saying, "Boy, I sure have problems tonight." And one could feel sorry for him. But I talked to one of the other clerks a little later, and he had an entirely different thought. He said, "You know, people sure have problems tonight." Both of them dealing with the same experience, one of them dealing with what I call horizontal thought, the other dealing with vertical thought. I have problems, people have problems. But I have problems because of the way I'm reacting to people problems. But if I keep myself in perfect peace, then I'm simply concerned that people have problems, but they're on the outside. Then I can handle them, then I can deal with them. When was the last time you said, "He makes me so mad," or "That just teased me off"? And of course, this is not correct at all. No one ever makes you mad. No one ever gets you upset. As I say often, you are upset because you're upsettable. You're angry because you have a anger consciousness that is touched like a little red button that causes it to blow up within yourself. But the anger is already within, you see. So you react in thinking to the level, according to the level of your attitudes, according to your consciousness. The thing that happens then is we allow our mental mastery to go by default. Some of us are completely unaware of the fact that we have the power to control the kind of thoughts that run rampant in our minds. That's the thing that's fundamental in this study of truth, to realize that it is your mind. Therefore, you have to ask yourself the question from time to time. When you find yourself terribly upset or concerned or anxious or worried about something that's happened, take a good look in yourself and ask yourself this one question. Not why do they do this? Why is the world falling apart? Why do we have so many problems in life? But why do I allow people or experiences or things to determine how I'm going to think or feel or act? This I can do something about. In the same way we tend to succumb to race beliefs, to group psychology, to subliminal suggestion. We're susceptible to the programming of mass media that is designed especially to control and influence thought, simply because we've allowed ourselves to react. This is why mass media is so successful. Because of this pattern of reactive thinking, we are led into a life that is not really our own at all. We don't live our lives. We live lives that are conditioned by outside stimuli. But that's because we refuse to accept the responsibility for our own thoughts. So the very first step in this process that we're calling the art of thinking is to know that no matter what happens in your world, no matter what happens out there, no matter what you read in the papers, no matter what is taking place around you or to you, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be fearful. You can choose to think positively or creatively if that's the way you want. You can become the master instead of the slave. Oh, it's not easy. Now, let's not kid ourselves. It's not easy to take possession of our mind. To change from being a reflex thinker to a creative thinker, it takes a lot of discipline and will and commitment because we've been thinking in the other way so long. But we can do so. It's not easy to think happiness when you're unhappy because your unhappiness is busy manufacturing more unhappy thoughts. Tagore comments on this. He says, the slave is busy making whips for his master. So we're busy manufacturing negative thoughts to fulfill the negative state of consciousness, and it goes round and round. It's a vicious cycle. So in a very real sense, it could be said, if someone asks you what your occupation is, if you want to be realistic about it, you could say, I'm a manufacturer. Because I'm always manufacturing the kind of things that happen in my life according to my consciousness. You see, we do this unthinkingly. It's like the little woman who, this is the classic story of the woman who was sitting commiserating over a lot of her problems, and she had a lot of problems. She was talking about them, almost counting them one by one like rosary beads. One of her friends trying to console her said, oh, come on now, things are not that bad. After all, you should try to be positive. And she said, classically, I don't see it that way. It seems to me when the Lord sends me tribulations, it's my duty to tribulate. Some people seem to feel that you should be unhappy, that you should be negative. If you walk into an office someday smiling and singing and whistling, people say, what do you have to be so happy about? But as I say so often, you don't have to have anything to be happy about ever. You can be happy simply because you want to be happy. Abraham Lincoln once said, a man is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be. This is the key to the positive life. This is the key to positive thinking. It's not filling your mind with a lot of happy platitudes, but it's simply determining that you have control and you can think the kind of thoughts that you want to think, and making the commitment at the beginning of the day and regularly through the day that you're not going to allow people or conditions or circumstances to decide how you're going to think or feel. Just watch the average person read the newspaper. Watch him on the subway sometime. Sometimes you wonder what are you going to do to preoccupy your thoughts on these long subway rides. Be analytical. Watch somebody reading the paper. You read a few of the lines, you go, oh, terrible. And there are a lot of things to tut-tut about, actually, because newspapers like the New York Post have really made tremendous hay on the process that people like to tut-tut. So the point is, that person is simply shoring up in consciousness the fact that he fully believes that it's a terrible world, that everything's going to pot, and so he reads all the things that says, see, I told you, I told you, I told you. And he's upset because he's upsettable. He's upsettable before he reads the paper. Now, if he wants to make any changes, either changes in the world or changes in himself, he has to begin to ask himself some serious questions. Why do I allow the New York Post or the New York Times or the Daily News, let's cover all the waterfront so he won't be partial. Why do we allow these things, these outside stimuli, to determine how I'm going to think? Why do we allow listening to the radio or the television to get me upset? Do I want to be upset? But you've got to be realistic, a person will say. After all, things are in the world, and what are you going to do about them? Fact is, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. You can say, as the hotel clerks did, one of them said, I have terrible problems, and the other one says, people have terrible problems. In the one case, the person is totally destroyed by the problems of people. In the other case, the person is there ready to help if he needs to help, but he keeps himself oblivious from it. He's objective, and thus he can serve without being destroyed within himself. And this is a very important realization. And I say this to a person who wants to be a good, positive truth student. Don't stop reading the paper, certainly. Don't stop listening to the news, unless you find that you do not have as yet the developed capacity to keep the news on the outside. If you don't, then you better not read the news for a while until you keep yourself in perfect peace and develop the capacity to control your own thoughts. Then you can read the news and listen to the news and see what's going on in the world, saying that the world has problems today. But not I have problems. The world has problems. Then suddenly you're in a state of consciousness where you can be a creative asset to the world, but at least you're not going to be destroyed by it.
I invite you now to take a moment to get still. This is a very important moment because we come from an experience of work, of activity, and perhaps somewhat symbolized by the conditions of the weather outside, like a turbulence at the surface of the sea. And we seek to get beneath the turbulence, to relate to ourselves and to life at a level deeper than that in which we find the tension and the strain of time and circumstance. So just take a moment to relax. Take a few deep breaths. And get yourself centered in the realization of your own unique relationship with the divine flow. And remember that the truth for you is the awareness of your wholeness, of your oneness, of your uniqueness. And in this consciousness, may you be receptive this evening to the stimulus of words and of thoughts that may prompt within yourself an awareness of nonverbal truths which will lead you to the heights of your consciousness and enable you to go forth this night with the perception equal to any challenge, any change, enabling you to work with strength and creativity, to live with health and joy, and to walk with the consciousness of an all-protecting presence. We give thanks for this. Amen. All right, let's think a little this evening about the law of attraction. One of the things that we discover, especially in a work like this where you deal with many people over a long period of time, is that most persons, even unknown to themselves, live with a subconscious feeling of injustice. This is a strange thing, but it's one of the things that we should understand about ourselves so that we can deal with it effectively. It's the feeling that some persons get all the breaks, that life is caprice, life is chance, and some people win all the games. And out of this quite often evolves a very simplistic sort of philosophy that most persons within themselves don't really believe, but which we mouth outwardly. Such things as, well, you win a few and you lose a few and some are rained out. What are you going to do? You have no chance. You have no choice. This is just the way life is. Some days are rainy and some days are sunny, and you just take it as it falls. And these are things that we say, and they're simplistic philosophies that we mouth, but basically within ourselves there's that hungers for more, and that seeks to identify with a universe of orderliness which outwardly we never quite see. This is why Jesus would say, "Judge not according to appearances." In other words, there is this constant recurring question that comes out of the human part of us that has this feeling of injustice. Why did this come to me? And why to me? Why not to somebody else? Quite often a person says, after 25 years on the job, they fire me. Why couldn't they be more sensitive? Why me? Why not somebody else? I've worked hard, other people around sit all day with their feet on the desk. Why me? Why should this happen at this time? And on, there's this same sort of a reaction to the changing experiences of life, because life is change. And the life without change certainly would not be life at all, because life is growth. So every day there's some new little thing that happens, and if we have not resolved this question of the injustices of life, and if we have not come to discover a fundamental principle that we're going to deal with tonight, then we're constantly upset. We're constantly, as the Bible says, kicking against the pricks. So fundamental to the awareness of this insight and truth is an understanding of what we call the law of attraction. It's not an easy law to accept. It's a very simple one to state, but it's not easy to accept because it strikes right at the heart of our own consciousness. And it's painful to look at our consciousness sometimes. It is best expressed, I think, in Jesus' statement, which is often expressed and rarely understood. To him that hath it shall be given, and from him that hath not it shall be taken away, even that which he hath. Well, this is one of the reasons why many people refuse to have anything to do with that Pollyanna Christian religion stuff, because it seems to indicate the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. People that have it get more, and the people that don't have it get kicked around. And this is, again, that sort of an evocation of this inner sense of injustice. What did it mean? To him that hath it shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. The best way to understand that is to see it in terms of a very simple law of physics. If I were to hold up for you here a piece of metal that is bent in the shape of a horseshoe and that is painted red except at the tips, I would say, what is it? You would say, it's a magnet. And how do you know it's a magnet? Because it looks like a magnet. But then, what is a magnet? Is a magnet a piece of steel that is bent in the shape of a horseshoe that's painted red? No. That's simply a piece of steel that looks like a magnet. But a magnet is a piece of steel of any shape that has had ensouled within it, or incarnated within it, a force of magnetic attraction. And it's that magnetic attraction that makes it a magnet. A piece of steel shaped like a horseshoe painted red that looks like a magnet could well be simply a piece of steel that has no magnetic attraction at all. How do you know whether it's a magnet? Well, one of the best ways, if you remember your early experience with a magnet as a child, is you take this magnet and you run it through a box full of sand. And you pick it out, and lo and behold, all these funny little things that are pieces of iron filings are attached to the magnet. So now you know it's magnetic. But if you took the piece of steel that is not magnetized and run it through the sand, you'd pick it up, nothing. And that's the difference, you see. So actually, what Jesus is saying, to him that hath it shall be given, he's saying the person who has ensouled within his consciousness this magnetic attraction, which is a part and parcel of the law of consciousness, he will draw more. He will draw things to him. He will be an irresistible magnetic attraction. And the person who does not have that consciousness, that awareness, that insight, that relationship of the divine flow, not only will not draw things to him, but he doesn't have any holding power. So even that which he has will constantly fall away. He's always having to hold on to things, to grasp things, to get things by hook or crook, or as the Bible says, by the sweat of his brow, and he can't hold on to anything. It all falls away because of the missing power of consciousness. Now this is a very simple way of dealing with it, but I think it's a very important insight. We'll think about that some more as we go along, try to keep the magnet in mind. One of our problems is we try to understand experiences of life without acknowledging this very simple metaphysical, if not purely physical, principle of consciousness. For instance, we look at the changing experiences of life, as a matter of fact, maybe some of the very difficult experiences, like an accident or an illness, or perhaps observing in the life of some other friend or reading about it in the paper a brain-damaged child, or looking at the extreme injustices of history, such as the Nazi Holocaust, or some personal financial loss. You can go from one extreme to another. And you try to understand these things in terms of an awareness of life which deals with a capricious universe, and you say, well, there's no justice. Well, what rhyme or reason is there? And there is no rhyme or reason to life if we approach it from that purely limited point of view. The tendency is, even to the person who is trying to understand things from a religious point of view, the tendency is to, as I think Thoreau probably says, you hold up a pasteboard God. There is a tendency to think that faith in God is the same thing as saying you have faith in God. Many persons have made the commitment to religion. They say, I believe in God, I believe in truth, I believe in law, and then assume that because you've said you believe in truth or believe in law, that means that you have an awareness of law, which may not be true at all. And the best way to see that is to be very analytical of yourself when you experience any kind of reverse or difficulty or injustice in your life, or even when you're trying to understand the injustices that you see out there in the world. The tendency so often is to begin with a God concept, which so often is an intellectual construct, and to hold it up here and say, all right, God, and it's a pasteboard God. You say, all right, God, if you're so great, how about this? How about that? How about this challenge? How can you allow such a thing to happen? So we try to see God through the lens of negative experience. And so we're looking through the difficulty, through the heartache, through the grief, through the injustice, through the lack, through the kind of perspectives and fuzzy perspectives that you get from watching all the terrible things on television. And you try to see God through that. And God seems pretty dim and pretty hazy. And there's no way that you can understand the reality of God or the fundamental relationship of life through truth as long as you try to see it or understand it through the experiences. The important thing then is to see the experiences through the lens of truth. It's almost as if we're looking through a pair of binoculars the wrong way around. You begin with a concept of truth, a concept of the allness of God, a concept in which you have a conviction that you live in an orderly universe. There could be no injustice in the universe, or the universe would lack integrity and would fall apart. That injustice must then be simply a lack of perspective, a lack of awareness of a process that's always working, even if sometimes it's frustrated. So you begin with the consciousness of an orderly universe, and then you see the experiences out there through this consciousness, which enables you then gradually to deal with them, to understand them, and to be able to dispose of them in an orderly way. Now, when you do not realize this fundamental law, this law of attraction, this law of consciousness, this orderliness of all things, then there is often a tendency to get involved in the endless round of trying to get yours. You know, this is the tendency of, well, if life is caprice and life is chance, maybe my number will come up, and maybe I should work harder to make it come up. So one quite often is impelled, maybe unconsciously, into such things as playing the numbers, or putting a wager now and then on the OTB, or thinking that maybe if the roulette wheel spins enough times, maybe every once in a while my number will come and I'll be able to make it big too. Also, this same negative feeling of injustice and the desire to try to overcome injustice by getting something for nothing is the same sort of motivation that leads the criminal mind into stealing, breaking and entering, all the various other ways of trying to get something for nothing. So we have to look very carefully at this whole general attitude, which is extremely negative, that is related to chance or luck. Because any consciousness or awareness or belief in chance or luck immediately dissolves and breaks down any true conviction or relationship with the law of attraction. Luck is probably the most flourishing excuse for misfortune. It's the most convenient answer. When something happens that is not to my liking, the easiest way out is to say, well, just my luck. After all, I get all the bad breaks. You know, it's always me, just my luck. It's convenient. It's a way also of soothing your own conscience. Because deep within yourself there is this feeling that you have your own unique relationship with the divine law, but it's kind of painful to accept it and to say that after all, I must have some relationship to this thing. So the easiest thing to do is say, well, just a lucky break. What do you do? So it now enables you to paint yourself up as an innocent victim
of an unknown sinister force that's involved. And it's rather interesting and funny and sad, too, that there is a tendency, if you watch your own consciousness, there's a tendency to impute all bad luck, or to impute all unfortunate circumstances to bad luck, but yet to claim that all success and achievement is the result of cleverness and skill. Isn't it true? You know, if something goes wrong, well, just my luck. But if it goes right, boy, I really did a good job there, didn't I? You know, which indicates that we all secretly desire to get ourselves in the flow, but we don't like to admit to ourselves that the law of consciousness is involved, that there's a law of attraction that is working here. In other words, let's just take a simple illustration that I've used so often, and it puts it in about the simplest form that we can possibly see. The person who has some sort of an unfortunate mishap, and let's keep it on a very simple level. It's nothing, he's driving his car and he gets nothing more than a bad scratch in the fender. But he's driving along and somebody's not watching where he's going, turns the corner too fast and kind of rumples his fender a little bit. Now he can feel very good about this in a way. He can say, even though my car got dented and I'm not happy about that, but it's not my fault. And he likes to emphasize that. It's not my fault. I mean, after all, he wasn't looking where he was going. And I guess it's no great problem because the insurance company will take care of it anyway. But he feels a little disturbed about this so-and-so that wasn't watching where he was going. Now, it may be hard for that person to accept the idea that there is a law of attraction involved, that there is no such thing as chance or luck. There's no such thing really as an accident. There are no accidents. All things are the result of the law of attraction, the law of consciousness. Now, it's hard for him to accept that, and he won't want to accept it probably, but we want to look at it. The fact is, the man certainly wasn't watching where he was going. He was driving recklessly, but this particular driver was there at that time. Now, why was he there? Why wasn't he somewhere else? Why didn't he leave 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later? Why wasn't he driving over a little bit so the fender didn't touch him? He was at that point, at that particular time, and there was that slight little collision, you see. Now, why? Well, of course, it strikes very deep and very much at the root of consciousness, and it's very hard to understand that. But the fact was that he was there at that time, and we are where we are at any given time because of the law of consciousness and the law of attraction. If we can't accept that, then really we cannot accept the whole insight and truth. It all breaks down. You see, consciousness is involved. There are no experiences that are totally unrelated to consciousness. It doesn't mean that we're trying to pin the blame on ourselves for everything that happens. But it means, on the other hand, that we shouldn't smugly shake it all off and say, well, after all, it wasn't my fault, it was somebody else's. Because we're failing to acknowledge experiences that reflect a need for growth within our own consciousness. Because we live with our consciousness. We live in it. Our life is the result of our consciousness. And if we're not willing to accept the gentle nudgings, which is what I like to call something like somebody running into your fender and just scratching it a little bit. This is a gentle nudging of the divine law. And it's a very gentle nudging, which is, to me, a good evidence of what some people like to call the grace of God, which is a term that's overworked and often misunderstood. But it evidences that something in your consciousness is askew, that you are out of the flow in that particular instant. So you have a gentle nudging. It's kind of like a warning traffic ticket. It doesn't really give you a fine but says, look, this time we're letting you off, but just remember, we know that you double parked or that you were speeding in a 20-mile zone and so forth. Maybe we don't always get those gentle nudgings by the police, but divine law seems to give us those gentle nudgings. That means that at that particular moment, whatever the mishap was, something in the divine law was coming back to us to indicate that the law of attraction is working, but by the grace of this process, you're not going to actually pay the full price. And if we're not willing to acknowledge that and accept it, then we miss what I would call a divine appointment. And perhaps the next time the nudging won't be quite as easy or gentle, you see. That's why it's important always to know there are no experiences unrelated to consciousness. It doesn't make any difference what it is. No point in saying, well, it's not my fault, it's his, it's theirs, it's because of what happened, it's because of the weather, it's because of what happened in Washington and all these things, and it's because of the bigwigs in my office. They're the ones that made this happen to me, but The law of consciousness is involved, and there is a law of attraction that is always working. And if we acknowledge this and begin to work with it, then we can develop the kind of awareness which makes very sure that we're always attracting the kind of things that we desire and repelling the kind of things that we don't want. It's a very important thing. In other words, each of us essentially, if we're going to look at it in a very simple way, each of us essentially is a living magnet. We are always drawing to ourselves things and people and circumstances in accordance with the level of our thought, with the focus of our mental attention. Now, the man might say, but I wasn't thinking about an accident, so why would this happen? Not consciously, obviously. He may have said, actually, I just left Unity and I had my mind on a talk that I just heard, which is still no defense. Because after all, he was driving a car and he shouldn't be thinking about a talk, he should be watching where he's going. But the point is, let's say that he didn't have a conscious thought about accidents or about any disorder of any kind. The fact is, our life is constantly influenced by certain patterns of consciousness in the subconscious mind, which are constantly working. The subconscious never sleeps. For instance, though the man probably was not thinking about accidents, if one could be very analytical or self-analytical, and I'm not sure that we should do this, if we're willing to accept it right off, that this is a part of the law of attraction that is working in my life, then you can let it go and not analyze it. But if you have to prove it, then take a good look within yourself and see, in this instance, if the man has ever had times or individual experiences when he has said, oh, these reckless drivers, or when he has said, there's so many accidents on the street these days, you really have to watch where you're going, you never know what the other guy's going to do, or where he has built a resistance to driving in traffic, or whether he has a fear of traffic, or whether he's a person who, and this always saddens me when I see it, who rubbernecks when he sees an accident. In other words, the person who always stands around and gawks when there's a terrible tragedy. He looks and he says, oh, terrible, terrible, terrible. But he looks at it, he keeps looking at it, he keeps letting it filter into his consciousness. Whether perhaps this is the kind of thing, but somewhere in the consciousness of that person, seed ideas of accidents have been planted, and he's allowed them and watered them through the years. So this little experience really was a very gentle nudging. And if he misses the opportunity, the divine appointment, he may say, oh, it wasn't my fault. Well, maybe the next experience might not be quite that gentle, that's what I say. I don't want to put it in that blunt a way, but I think it's important that we see that consciousness is involved and the law of attraction is always working. Now, so the important thing then is, as far as I'm concerned, don't try to find out why it happened and what it is in my consciousness that caused it, because this is, in a sense, like Job trying to justify yourself, trying to probe around and say, well, I can prove that it wasn't me. This is what Job did. The whole book of Job is on that basis. I didn't deserve this. You know, God's picking on me. That's, in a sense, what the book of Job is talking about, you see, because he had some terrible difficulties and experiences. But it's so important to accept it as happening and let it go. And accept the idea that in the experience, the gentle nudging is telling me that I need to build into my consciousness, take the magnet again, to ensoul into the magnet a magnetic attraction. If the magnet is not picking up the kind of things it ought to be, then it's lost its magnetic properties and it needs to be remagnetized. That's a very crude illustration. But this is what our study of truth is. If you wonder sometimes what good there is in the involvement that so many truth students have in reading, listening, studying, constantly being involved in it, what good all this is it just a waste of time or are you just kidding yourself? Recall Jesus' words, lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. As a matter of fact, it could be said that a person who lives in the kind of challenging environment that we have in an urban situation, especially with the mass media constantly giving us hour after hour of all sorts of negatives, and especially if one is the kind that sits in front of it and just soaks it up, or reads the paper and all the problems of the city and so forth, one actually requires a
process of rebuilding and infilling much more. And the need then is to continually lay up treasures in heaven, which is a matter of ensouling in your consciousness certain positive vibrations and patterns of good, reinstilling within yourself the awareness that there is a divine order that is involved everywhere in life, that there is a protecting presence, that there is an endless source and flow of divine love. One needs to continually build his consciousness in this. If he does not, the chances are very likely that he will be resisting things or simply passively accepting them. And either way, he's involved in laying up problems in his consciousness. One of the things I think is this matter of trying to resolve once and for all the matter of chance or luck. If ever some difficulty occurs, no matter what it is, some simple thing or some great thing, it's important that you do not allow yourself to get into the kind of attitude that would say, a twist of fate can ruin my whole life. The loss of a job can be the end of everything. The important thing is to know that somehow, no matter what happens, the happening itself is a part of the law of attraction, a part of consciousness manifesting in my life, but it is not necessarily bad. It is good that it has happened because it shows me where I am, but I can build on it wherever I am and whatever the experience is and turn it into something good. Now that's the beautiful part of the law of consciousness. And it's so important immediately that you don't follow the old habit track of naming the experience bad luck. Because what happens, if you name it bad luck, you consciously relate yourself to the law of chance. And when you're thinking and acting in life on the level of chance, there will be a tendency then for that chance experience or that luck vibration to constantly move, almost like the karmic law, as a rolling wheel that will keep bringing experiences of luck, good luck, bad luck, and so forth. In other words, on the other side of the coin, it's important, and this is a very difficult challenge because it's so easy to accept the other kind of whimsically and lightheartedly. It's important not to see such a thing as a sudden, unexpected promotion, as a stroke of good luck, or some financial windfall, or some safe trip in a storm when so many people are having difficulties. It's so important that you don't equate this with good luck. Because if you see it as coming as a result of good luck, in consciousness, you've got that old wheel of chance again. And that which has come to you in a consciousness of good luck can very easily fall away again in an experience of bad luck, because you've set the law. You've decided that it's a result of lucky experiences. Quite often a person will say, I've been very lucky. I haven't had any colds this winter. If you put your physical health on the level of luck, even good luck, you've established in consciousness an attitude that works like law. That means that your health is a matter of chance. And if you can be lucky and have good health, you can also be unlucky. Because at the heart of this chance experience is an attitude that has gone the rounds throughout the race from time immemorial, that when your number is up, you go. You ever heard that before? That sometimes your number comes up, and what are you going to do? Que sera, sera. What will be, will be. All these things are ingrained in human consciousness, you see. So it's important that you get off the roulette wheel, off the wheel of chance, and know that the law of attraction is involved. If a difficult experience comes, it comes by the law of consciousness. Let me accept it as a gentle nudging, and then work to ensoul in my consciousness positive so that this thing will not continue and won't happen again. If some good thing comes, accept it as the natural outworking of the divine flow. Sometimes it takes a lot of humility, and it takes maybe a lot of self-praise at other times to accept something that comes as that which you have earned by right of consciousness. It's an interesting thing. Many people feel that it's the most difficult thing to learn how to give. Actually, it's the greatest problem is to learn how to receive, to learn how to accept beautiful demonstrations in life without saying, well, I was lucky. Because if you say I was lucky, what you're really saying, I didn't deserve it. And that's a part of our own lack of self-image, you see. But this is a very negative and a very detrimental thing to our spiritual unfoldment. Lay up treasures in heaven, Jesus says. Incarnate
a magnetic property into your own consciousness. Build positive states, positive awareness. Emerson says, nerve yourself with incessant affirmatives. Continually build up in your consciousness the realization that you're one with the divine flow. You're free from limitations. In other words, the man in the experience with the car needs to accept the fact that for a moment I was out of the flow, and therefore now I should remember that in all relationships that I have with my automobile, I should be very careful to prepare the way for the trip by knowing that I'm surrounded and enfolded by infinite love and wisdom, that there is no possibility of accidents and mistakes. I bless all the people on the road. I bless my car. This idea of blessing is an old-fashioned idea, but it's a very important one. And it's important for this reason. When you are not blessing a thing in a positive sense, you are either cursing it or you are neutral. And if you're neutral, you're absorbing it. Sometimes it's even better to curse it than it is to be neutral and just absorb it. Because if you curse it, at least you're out in the open. But in each case, you're resisting it. You see, if you're passive to the thing, very neutral about it, oh, well, so what? That's the way things are in life. Some people listen to the news every night in this way. You see all the terrible things going on. And the person thinks he's being neutral. He says, well, after all, I live in this world. I should keep informed. But it's one thing to be informed. It's another thing to be mentally deformed. And if you accept it in the consciousness of sympathy, if you're always looking around at all the terrible things that are happening, you're very sympathetic. Oh, isn't it terrible? You know, if you want to have an interesting pastime, watch the average person. If you're riding a subway, friend, watch him read the newspaper. Just kind of watch his eyes and his face, and quite often you'll see, oh my. You know, this sense of, isn't it terrible? What a terrible world we live in. Why does he read the newspaper? He wants to be informed, but he's being deformed. He's ensouling in his consciousness all these negative things. And then when he comes to the conclusion that it's a terrible world, and when some terrible thing happens to him, he says, well, that vindicates my judgment. See, it is a terrible world. He doesn't realize that terrible things happen because he has ensouled terrible conditions in his consciousness, and therefore he attracts these things. I'm not saying one shouldn't read the news or watch the news on television. I think probably it's better to watch a little less than maybe we do. I've read recently, as some of you have, that some of the networks are going through tremendous problems. It's a real problem to plan 2 hours of news in one session. You may say, well, after all, there's plenty going on in the city. But if you know anybody involved in the news media, you know the terrible ends they go to rake up news, to keep that 2 hours filled with news programs, you see. And one say, well, I should be informed, but you're being informed with a negative and a distorted view of what is really going on in the community. Because the things that are being dredged up are the things that are newsworthy, which means are negative properties guaranteed to deform the consciousness of the listener. And it's not easy to find all those things, you see. But that's what we consider news to be. The important thing then is to begin to use the power of blessing. One cannot, without hiding his head in the sand, which he should not do, one cannot get along very far in life without being exposed to difficult, unjust, negative experiences. There's a lot in the world in which we live, as well as there's a lot of beautiful things. But instead of being passive or reacting negatively, it's so important to make a positive projection of the power of blessing. Instead of, oh, well, what are you going to do? It's so important to bless it, to think of it in terms of a projection of positive power. It's a marvelous exercise in using the truth that otherwise you may be playing with or dazzling your consciousness with, to actually bless it. For instance, there's a couple that I knew many years ago and I loved and admired very much. They were both very committed students of this experience in truth. The man was a traveling salesman of one kind or another, and the wife stayed at home. And the man traveled all over the Midwest, did a great deal of driving. And so they would have a little game they played. Before he would start out every day, they had a song that they created. I'm not going to sing it for you because this is not a recital, but
The words went like this: blessing the highways, blessing the byways, someone is traveling today. Blessing the airways, blessing the railways, someone is traveling today. And they would sing this together. And she would occasionally sing it while he was gone, and he would sing it himself while he was driving down the road. Now, the important thing was, you see, this was a very altruistic, very loving approach to blessing. Because there might be a tendency sometimes to say, well, I know that I will be surrounded and enfolded wherever I go, so that no matter what happens, I'll be protected. Which is a kind of a blessing too, but it's a sort of a self-centered blessing. That no matter what I get into, I know that I'll be protected, you see. But this was a blessing that radiated outward. That when the man was going out on the road, he was saying, I bless all the cars. I bless all the people that are traveling. I bless all the airplanes overhead. Bless all the railroads. You may say, well, that's a kind of a naive thing to do. But according to the power of blessing, you see, he was projecting. They were both projecting a consciousness which is the best possible protective device to keep your own consciousness from being polluted with fear. It's like saying a faucet that is constantly running with water is probably not going to be polluted, at least from the outside. How can anything get back into the faucet if it's constantly running water? And if your consciousness is projecting the thought of blessing, the chance is very unlikely that you're going to be negatively influenced or distorted by things you see, by things you read about, by the outward appearances, you see. So the power of blessing is a very important one. Or if someone starts a new job or leaves on a trip, how often it happens almost unwittingly without a person thinking too much about it, one would say, good luck on your trip. Or good luck in your new job. What's wrong with that? The fact is, without realizing, you've introduced the concept of chance. Do you want to send this person forth on the realization that his safety on the trip depends upon luck? That's playing Russian roulette. You know, he may get by 10 times out of 11, 19 out of 20, but there's always that other one, you see. And you've introduced this into consciousness, into yours especially, and maybe you've implanted it into his by saying, good luck on your new job. How easily and unthinkingly we say such things. Why not be conscious of the law of attraction involved? There's nothing lucky or unlucky about it. He has a new job. Why not give thanks that he's drawn this job to him by the law of attraction because he has the ability to do a good job, and simply bless him. Say, I know you're going to do a great job in your great work on your new job. I know you're going to have great success. You're simply saying yes to something that's already happened. It's happened because the job came. He's starting on a trip. If you can't say anything else, just say namaskar, or say, I bless you on your trip, or I know that you're going to have a safe and beautiful and wonderful journey. But get out of the thought, the limitation, the trap of good luck, bad luck. Because anytime you suggest or even toy with the idea of luck, even a very joyous experience of good luck, you've got the wheel of chance that's rolling. And consciousness, you see, is involved in this. And it's a very negative thing then. Paul says, to them that love God, all things work together for good. To them that love God, all things work together for good. Now, what does this mean? How do you know you love God? What he's saying is, in a sense, that if you love God, you will always be in the flow of good experiences. How do you love God? As I said, so often we feel that loving God is simply a matter of saying we love God. But look at it in another way, in a very practical sense in which we relate to life. How do you love light? You love light in your house by opening the window. How do you love air? By breathing. How do you love electricity in the context of your home? By turning on the switch and allowing the power to flow and heat up the filament. Whatever may be the appliance that you have. You love it by letting it do its perfect work. So how do you love God? By being open and receptive to a divine flow. By getting into the conscious awareness of the divine activity that's ever working in your life. Identifying with it, keeping in that awareness, keeping consciously alive to this idea. And when you love God in this sense, then the promise is all things work together for good. Not in a limited sense, not chance, but work for good. All things work for good, even the seeming negative experience.
if one is consciously involved in this divine law working through him, then no matter what happens, and it's true that in the world, as Jesus said, in the world you have tribulation, but behold, I have overcome the world, which would indicate that when you're involved in a mixing of consciousness of many, many different people and many different levels, certainly it would be perhaps naive to assume that your consciousness is great enough to counteract all the negatives around you so that you never have a challenging experience. But the law is that if you consciously, in your own inner awareness, believe and continually establish the conviction of your oneness with the divine flow, then all things work together for good, regardless. As the scriptures tell us, ye may have intended it for evil, but God intends it for good. Even if there is a reverse or a loss or a difficulty or a stress or a strain, there is always within you the ability not only to meet it, to rise above it, but to see it as something that was the best thing that ever happened to you. And that's very important. Love God. Emphasize the good. Now, Paul says, and this is another very interesting thought, I believe, because it touches upon things that we're all involved in. Therefore, we ought to give more earnest heed to the things that were heard, talking about the truth, lest haply we drift away from them. Lest haply we drift away from them. I love that word, drift. Have you ever watched the tide and referred to the drift of the tide? How the tide gradually comes in, and then the tide gradually flows out. It's a very subtle thing. You know, it's a thing that just kind of happens before your eyes, and the first thing you know, the tide is in and the tide is out. But there's a drift that's taking place. Lest haply we drift away from them. How easily we can drift away from the level of awareness where we know that we're in the flow of God, in the flow of good, you see. So he says, we therefore ought to give more earnest heed to the things that were heard, which means that we have to keep at it. You know, some people say, well, you know, I studied the truth. Yeah, I had that course 10 years ago. So what else is new? And he has a certificate to show that he graduated with honors. It doesn't kind of work that way. It's like saying the tide came in once, so you don't have to worry about it again. But the tide is always coming in and going out because we live in a world, and the world is involved in constant movement. Life is change. Life is growth. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You're not the same person you were 10 minutes ago. Because life is a constant process of change. The fundamentalists sometimes sort of at least indicate that it is believed, it's about as far as I will go, that when you are saved, when you accept the Lord Jesus Christ and you are saved, that now it's all over. And you can feel very beautiful because I'm saved. Would that we could ever be saved in that sense in terms of divine law. Divine law is always working. It's like saying I passed the test on the law of gravity, so now it doesn't matter what I do. If you were saved by the law of gravity, then you still have to work with the law of gravity every single moment of your life. All the time, not part of the time. We're always involved in the law. We're always involved in the law of attraction. All the time. There's no King's X. You can't say it's like the story of the people who were sitting around in the parlor and they were playing a game, and one of them dreamed up a good game and says, I think we'll play the game of faces. Oh, yes. Let's all make the ugliest face we possibly can make. And then Jim here will pick out who's the ugliest, and then we'll award a prize. And so they all screwed up their faces and made these terrible-looking faces. Finally, when they were all through, he picked out this one person. She says, oh, it ain't fair, I wasn't even playing. But there's no King's X, you see. So often we say, well, you know, we talk about negative things, and we even have fantasies and negative things. We say, well, Reeves, just kidding. The important thing is the subconscious mind can't take a joke. You see, the divine law is always working, always working. The law of attraction is constantly involved. Now, this law also has another side to it, which I think is very important to see as we round this thing out. The law of attraction also involves the law of repulsion. They're both a part of the same law. I have seen a little device which is used in teaching physics to high school children. Some teacher showed this to me. It's a very interesting device that's kind of unbelievable when you see it, and yet very simple in its physical law involved. And it has a round base with a pole, like a pole for horseshoes, And there's a very heavy washer, a metallic washer of a substance that perhaps has some sort of a ceramic between it so that it's polarized, and it has a positive charge on one side and a negative charge on the other. And there's another washer exactly like it. You drop the one washer down, you drop the other washer on top of it, and when the poles are opposed, then instead of attracting to one another, it's repulsed. And you can take that washer and you can push it with all your force, and you cannot make those washers meet. There's no possible way that you can do it, showing the tremendous power of attraction in reverse, the power of repulsion. Where if you turn it over, then boom, they pull right down together. But you turn it back that way and you can't make them. It'll ride on thin air. This teacher has it sitting up in front of the class. The people throughout all the class see this washer riding on thin air. It doesn't go anywhere, it just stands right there, you see. And this shows the power of repulsion. Attraction and repulsion are two sides of the same force. That when you are in the awareness or have this consciousness of the activity of truth ensouled within your subconscious mind, then you not only attract good things to you, but you repel from you that which is not in keeping with your own consciousness, or in keeping with your life, that which would be negative, that which would be destructive, that which would be harmful. And the same force works. And when you're in the consciousness of your oneness with this divine flow, this works automatically. You don't have to be selective. You don't have to say, well, I want to take this and I don't want that. You just know that you're in the flow of good, and you constantly keep that alive in your consciousness. And wherever you go, you will draw that which is good to you, and you will repel that which would be destructive or injurious to you, you see. But consciousness works in this way. It is constantly working, and there is no way that you can disrupt it. One of the things that I think we can see as a little workshop experience right out there in the world today. This morning, many of you remember, we live out in the suburbs, and we heard on the radio, as we always try to catch the weather report, because when you come in from a good distance out, we live about 40 miles out, you want to be sure that you have the proper attire and so forth. And so we heard the weather. They were planning a tremendous storm, possibly 1 to 3 inches of snow here, maybe 4 to 6 inches out there, and so forth. And so this is the kind of thing that we're involved in a great deal. But it's a very interesting exercise in understanding how consciousness works. I wonder how many of you are aware of the fact that when a weather reporter at the Weather Bureau, when he's sort of equivocating and having a difficult time pinning it down and saying this is going to happen, it's not that he doesn't know what he's about, because he may well see on the radar screen a storm out here that's coming this way, and he can assume that if it's coming this way, it's going to come and it's going to dump its load and it's going to be a real problem. But what we cannot always be sure of is the barometric
Man, I'm out here building these websites and building these web platforms and all these type of things. What I'm working on right now is this link right here. Let's see if this is the right link. Yeah, that's my new stars link. And so that link right there takes you into a spot where all of the stars are listed, like a Hall of Fame type situation. And so that's what I'm essentially working on right now. Increasing more love and more power. And then I'm going to be moving on shortly to all these various other projects that have to get worked out tonight. I think I said I was going to work from, what did I say? 6 till 10? Y'all know I'll still be up at midnight. So I've got like 4 hours of work left. Thanks for stopping by, Tech. Always a pleasure. Mm. Yeah, brother. That's my like Hollywood Star Walk of Fame, my personal Hollywood Star Walk of Fame, and I love it. I love it. We're crushing these dreams one step at a time. It's been wonderful. Those are all loaded in already, so I can actually just build up to that. Shout out to Tech. Good to see you, my friend.